One of the things I find really interesting about the Hijacked project is that, in a sense, it's contributing to a kind of mapping of photography in Australia, as much as the project is about positioning a group of photographers from Australia in relation to those working from another country, and in this particular instance, photography in the UK. But photography is global, and one of the things that's really interesting about this project is that photographers are as global as photographs they make. And so photographers in Australia may not necessarily be from Australia, yet they will still always be making photography in relation to the local concerns of that particular place. And one of the main kind of local concerns, or shadows if you like, which is cast over these photographers, is its relatively recent colonial history. And it's more prevalent in some of the photographers' work than others. For instance, in the Aboriginal Australian artists such as Bindi or Christian Thompson, whose work deals very much with their own particular experience of being in Aboriginal Australia, and especially with Christian Thompson's work. It's a self-portrait-based practice. Yet he doesn't necessarily deal with his own particularities of his own biography. Yet he uses his body in such a way to represent a more broader kind of picture of Aboriginal Australia. And he does that often by obscuring his face with either flowers or pearls, which might be seen as being products of Australia, but also by using motifs taken from traditional Aboriginal art or textile design in the clothing that he wears. And so there's still this kind of overlaying of a kind of a representation of Aboriginal Australia. The work of Bindi is extremely local in that sense. It's about a particular group of people from the Tiwi Islands, and a kind of representation of that people. I mean, I've never really talked about trying to identify a particular Australian aesthetic, but what I do find interesting is that photographs made in Australia are made in response to the kind of cultural or local concerns of that particular place. You might then kind of look for aesthetic similarities in the work, in the representation of the geography or building or architecture of the place. And as much as you might sort of see a kind of referencing of Aboriginal art in some of the motifs that feature on the clothing that Christian Thompson wears in these self-portraiture-based works. In looking at the work of Simon Roberts, there's also a kind of referencing to a local art historical reference to, say, someone like Lowry, for instance, and those kind of very sort of high camera positions that Simon uses, the kind of diminishing of the human figure in the form in the kind of multitude of daily activities. Very much, a response to a local concern as someone resident and living in the UK. So, although, on the one hand, I've spoken very briefly about artists from the UK who might have made work in relation to a particular kind of aspect of their history, I don't think we can make a kind of corresponding, okay, so Australians make work in relation to their colonial history, therefore UK photographers make work in relation to being the colonisers. That's not necessarily the case.